Announcements none. Papers have been laid. Question none. Motion.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that all the business on today's order paper be exempted from the provisions of paragraph 2 of Standing Order 10.
Seconded. The question is that all the business on today's order paper be exempted from the provisions of paragraph 2 of Standing Order 10. Those in favor say aye, those against say no. Aye. The ayes have it.
Statements by ministers.
Mr. Speaker, sir, with your permission, I wish to make the following statement. Since the year 1992, Mauritius is a signatory to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and its Secretariat extends an invitation every year to my ministry in its capacity as national focal point to participate in the Conference of Parties. And pursuant to an invitation made again this year, I led a delegation at the 28th session of the Conference of Parties, commonly known as COP28, held from the 30th of November to the 12th of December 2023 in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, and comprising the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Republic of Mauritius to the United Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain. Officers of my ministry, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Regional Integration and International Trade, the Attorney General's Office, and the Mauritius Meteorological Services. This year, COP28 was kick-started by the World Climate Action Summit on the 1st of December and the 2nd of December 2023, which was attended by some 154 heads of state and government, including myself as head of the Mauritian delegation. Mr. Speaker, sir, COP28 comprised various formal and informal negotiations, as well as high-level ministerial sessions to guide the technical sessions. Moreover, side events were organized in parallel to highlight the achievements on implementation of climate actions and to encourage the networking of participants. COP28 galvanized global attention, particularly on three key issues, namely the operationalization and funding of loss and damage fund, the conclusion of the first global stocktake, and the formulation of the global goal of adaptation framework, which aimed at setting targets and metrics for parties to formulate and implement climate adaptation actions and monitor progress thereof. Those outcomes were expected to guide the pathway to effectively implement the Paris Agreement by keeping the 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rise alive, inform and strengthen climate adaptation and resilience of ecosystems and people, enhance means of implementation, and provide the funds for loss and damage. As an end result, an outcome document named as the UAE consensus document by the COP28 presidency was adopted on the 13th of December 2023 with key decisions of interest to Mauritius, namely operationalization of the loss and damage fund and pledges made by some countries to the tune of $750 million USD for the capitalization of the fund. The board of the fund will be hosted at the World Bank on an interim basis for 4 years and is expected to hold its first meeting in January 2024 to start working on the modalities of the funding mechanism. Accordingly, the candidature of 2 firm and 2 alternate small island developing states can be submitted to serve as member to the board. In that respect, Mauritius has submitted its candidature, and the final decision now rests on the alliance of small island states. Second, adoption of the global stocktake to course correct action in order to keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius alive in this critical decade. Recommendation to triple the use of renewable energy and double energy efficiency by 2030 were also made. The final agreement refers to a global transition away from fossil fuels in energy systems in a just, orderly, and equitable manner, accelerating action in this critical decade so as to achieve net zero by 2050 in keeping with the science. This is the first time the shift away from fossil fuels has been explicitly included in a final agreement at COP. There is no mention of phase out or phase down of same. The term transitioning has instead been used as a consensus. Based on the principles of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities and capabilities, countries will need to enhance their ambitions to meet the 1.5 degrees Celsius target. 3. Adoption of the Global Goal on Adaptation Framework to provide for a set of global adaptation goals to build resilience to the impact of climate. Global targets have been agreed upon, and next year, workshops and meetings would be convened by the Secretariat of the UNFCCC to propose indicators to meet those targets and link same to means of implementation. And 4, provision of some 83 million USD to existing financial mechanisms, namely the Green Climate Fund and the Adaptation Fund, to support developing and vulnerable countries in their climate actions. Mr. Speaker, sir, on the 1st of December and the 2nd of December 2023, I attended the high-level events on adaptation, means of implementation and mitigation under the chair of the first Global Stocktake High-Level Committee. World leaders seized the opportunity to underline the critical role of the global stocktake in order to address gaps and thereby provide for enhanced delivery of climate action and sustainable development objectives. On the 2nd of December 2023, I intervened in the first summit of leaders of the G77 and China under the chair of Cuba. I stated the concerns of Mauritius while emphasizing that same were aligned with those of the group. Moreover, while highlighting the specificities of the small and vulnerable member states within the group, I advocated that a special consideration should be given to small and developing states in all forums and reiterated the need for developed countries to deliver on their promises to provide the necessary financial, technical, and technological support to enable all parties to work towards the targets of the Paris Agreement. On the 9th of December 2023, during the second part of the high-level segment, I delivered my statement whereby the vulnerabilities and specificities of Mauritius as a small island developing state, the status of implementation of our nationally determined contributions, and the high cost of climate actions were highlighted. Furthermore, I urge for the provision of enhanced means of implementation for small island developing states and developing countries. Furthermore, I acted as keynote speaker and panelist in different high-level side events on sectoral themes, namely health, circular economy, energy, trade, amongst others. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the margin of COP28, the Mauritian delegation attended all the formal and informal sessions under the Conference of Parties to the UNFCCC with regard to key priority agenda items, namely global stocktake, global goal and adaptation framework, just transition, climate finance, and Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which deals with market and non-market instruments. Those main themes included several sub-themes items. While for some decisions were adopted at the COP28, others remain to be further negotiated at COP29 next year. Pursuant to a call made to by my ministry, the Economic Development Board and Business Mauritius, some 45 representatives of at least 16 public and private sector organizations had the opportunity to participate as speakers or moderators in the side events organized in the Commonwealth, the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie Pavilions, and by the Indian Ocean Commission. The objective of those events was to allow both the public and private sectors to share local best practices in terms of green financing, circular economy, adaptation and mitigations, amongst others, as well as promote networking with regional and international partners. Mr. Speaker, sir, as a way forward, my ministry would be organizing a debriefing session with all relevant stakeholders under my chairmanship with a view to apprise its members of the key outcome of COP28. and in line with the preparations of the participation of Mauritius at the conference, a core team comprising representatives of my ministry, the Ministry of Finance, Economic Planning and Development, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Regional Integration and International Trade, and the Attorney General's Office was set up under the chair of my ministry to prepare for the negotiation aspects. Given the critical importance of climate change as a multilateral process towards addressing climate actions and climate justice, and its strong linkage to our development agenda, I am proposing to formalize this core team which would include members from relevant ministries, departments, and other stakeholders thereon. Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank you for your attention.
Can I request the Minister to circulate his statement so that we don't have to wait for Hansard?
Minister.
Monsieur le Président.
Motion.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move the motion standing in my name on the order paper, namely, this Assembly, in conformity with Section 39(4) of the Constitution of Mauritius, approves the report of the Electoral Boundaries Commission on the review of the boundaries of the constituencies released in 2020 and which was laid on the table of the National Assembly on 3rd of November 2020. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Electoral Boundaries Commission, established under Section 38 of the Constitution, has the statutory mandate under Section 39(2) of the Constitution to review the boundaries of the constituencies of the Republic of Mauritius every 10 years and to submit a report to the National Assembly following the presentation of its last report. According to Section 118(4) of the Constitution, the Commission shall not be subject to the direction or control of any other person or authority in the exercise of its functions. Pursuant to Section 39(3) of the Constitution, the report of the Electoral Boundaries Commission shall make recommendations for any alterations to the boundaries of the Constitution of the constituencies as appear to the Commission to be required, so that the number of inhabitants of each constituency is as nearly equal as is reasonably practicable to the population quota. And population quota means, and I quote, the number obtained by dividing the number of inhabitants of the island of Mauritius according to the latest official census of the population of Mauritius by 20, unquote. Upon presentation of the motion, the Assembly may, by resolution, approve or reject the recommendations of the Electoral Boundaries Commission, but may not vary them, and if so approved, the recommendations shall have effect as from the next dissolution of Parliament. The motion is not merely a procedural formality. It represents a crucial step in upholding the democratic values of our nation. The adoption of the recommendations of the Electoral Boundaries Commission in its 2020 report is a matter of utmost importance for the future of our electoral processes. If electoral boundaries are not periodically adjusted, population inequities may occur across constituencies. Mr. Speaker, sir, the report of the Electoral Boundaries Commission was submitted by the Commission to Mr. Speaker on 16th of October 2020, and subsequently same was tabled in the National Assembly on 3rd November 2020. The 2020 report is the outcome of the work started by the Electoral Boundaries Commission since 2015 in the preparation of the review of the boundaries exercise. The Commission had, by way of press communiques, dated 16th of November 2016, 28th of February 2017, and 4th of October 2018, invited political parties and interested persons to submit their views and suggestions in relation thereto. 52 written representations were received. The Commission had also conducted public hearings, which started in April 2018 and ended in April 2019, during which 35 persons deposed on their own behalf and or on behalf of the organizations they represented. The Commission gave careful consideration to all representations made in writing, as well as those given orally. Thereafter, the Commission effected in situ visits during the months of April and May in 2018 and in 2019 to examine the views and suggestions received through the written representations and from deponents. The purpose of the site visits was to explore and assess the feasibility and practicality of the recommendations it was proposing to make. In spite of the halt caused in work of the Commission due to the writs of elections being issued on 6th of October 2019 for the holding of the National Assembly elections on 7th of November 2019, as well as the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, the Commission has delivered on its mandate. Mr. Speaker, sir, in fact, since Mauritius became independent in 1968, the Electoral Boundaries Commission has diligently fulfilled its constitutional duty, producing 5 reports on the review of constituency boundaries, namely in 1976, 1986, 1999, 2009, and 2020. The recommendations in the 1986 and 1999 reports were approved by the National Assembly, whilst the 1976 recommendations were rejected. The previous report of the Commission, which had been submitted in 2009 and handed over to the then Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly on 30th October 2009, was tabled in the National Assembly on 10th of November 2009. The National Assembly was dissolved on 31st of March 2010, but no resolution was presented in the National Assembly by the then government to approve or reject the recommendations of the Commission. Thus, the current boundaries of the 20 constituencies of Mauritius, as described in General Notice 552 of 2000, are the same as those recommended in the 1999 report of the Commission, which was presented to the National Assembly on 17th of December 1999, almost a quarter of a century ago. The present boundaries have served us well. However, the passage of time has brought forth a series of challenges that necessitate our urgent attention. In In the 2020 exercise, the Commission kept as guiding principle that for any alteration to any boundary, the number of inhabitants of each constituency is as nearly equal as is reasonably practicable to the population quota. The exercise for determining the population quota for the present report was based on the figures obtained in the latest population census carried out in 2011. The approach adopted by the Commission has looked into all constituencies in a holistic manner as they are interconnected, and any alteration to a constituency boundary is likely to have a ripple effect on neighboring constituencies. Since the recommendations of the last report were approved, our nation has undergone significant demographic changes. The Commission has taken into consideration, amongst others, the evolving social dynamics and the significant growth of residential developments that have resulted in population movement. In its report, the Electoral Boundaries Commission, after having carefully analyzed the above-mentioned factors, made several other pertinent observations also, namely the impact of climate change on a number of geographical features, such as feeder canals and rivers, which used to provide certainty to the limits of some constituencies. The Commission has also taken into consideration the significant growth of residential and industrial developments that have resulted in population movement, as well as other infrastructural developments which have brought about further alterations to some existing geographical features, requiring the boundaries to be better defined. In certain regions, boundaries comprising old railway tracks, feeder canals, and estate road no longer exist. And there are also instances where the existing boundaries are cutting across existing housing estates as well as future residential developments. Certain residential developments have straddled more than one constituency, with the result that electors living in the same area find themselves in different constituencies when it comes to electing their representatives. The Commission has consequently revisited some boundaries to correct this anomalous situation, whilst taking into account other relevant factors as set out in the report. The Commission has, wherever possible, endeavored to review and describe boundaries so that they become clearly identifiable. Also, as the House is aware, a motion was passed in the National Assembly on the 12th of June 2019 for the inclusion of the Chagos Archipelago in one of the constituencies of Mauritius. This has also been taken on board by the Commission in its recommendations. Mr. Speaker, sir, the proposal for changes and amendments to the constituencies have been supported by reasons, as clearly explained in the report. In conclusion, the Commission made it clear that it had conducted its review of boundaries within the ambit of its constitutional mandate. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is apposite to note that the Office of the Electoral Commissioner is planning to conduct a house-to-house inquiry, which will be carried out from January to February 2024 for the purposes of compiling the 2024 Register of Electors. This register will come into force on 16th of August 2024. In the event the recommendations of the Electoral Boundaries Commission are approved, the house-to-house inquiry and eventually the publication of the new register of electors would be based on the new constituency boundaries as approved by the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, sir, on this note, I commend the motion to the House.
Mr. Speaker, honourable members, I have to thank the Electoral Boundaries Commission and its chairman for its report, which is before us. I wish also to thank the Electoral Commissioner, who must have provided vital feed-in. As the Honourable Prime Minister just said, the most important constitutional proviso the Electoral Board has to abide by when reviewing every 10 years the electoral boundaries is Section 39 of the Constitution, which provides that each of the 20 mainland constituencies shall be the same, shall have the same, as nearly as possible and reasonably practicable, the same number, the same population. We are at present very far from that. We are still, even after this report, we shall still be very far from that constitutional proviso. And it's no fault of the Electoral Boundaries Commission. But the report, the Electoral Boundaries Commission, the present report, moves us in that direction on that issue. The Electoral Boundaries Commission obviously cannot please everyone, and its report cannot do that, and does not do that. But it has done its best. The motion is to approve the Electoral Boundaries Commission report before us. It does not need a three-quarter majority to be approved, which means that the government does not need the opposition's vote to get the report approved. But on our side, we do not disapprove in toto the report of the Electoral Boundaries Commission. But what we deplore, however, is the fact that this report of the Electoral Boundaries Commission is brought before the House 3 years after it was laid on the table of the Assembly, and on the eve of the next general elections. This does not adequately provide for members to get fully acquainted with the regions that will be added to their individual constituencies. Thank you.
Romano.
Monsieur le Président, merci de me donner la possibilité d'intervenir sur la présente motion de l'honorable Premier ministre. Avant d'entrer dans les commentaires du présent rapport, comme l'a si bien souligné le Premier ministre, Monsieur le Président, c'est un rapport fait selon les provisions constitutionnelles, notamment la section 39.3 de la Constitution, et qui se lit comme suit, Monsieur le Président: The report of the Electoral Boundaries Commission shall make recommendations for any alterations to the boundaries of the constituencies. Et, Monsieur le Président, il faut aussi se rendre à l'évidence de l'autre section, de la section 39.3, provided that the number of inhabitants of a constituency may be greater or less than the population quota in order to take into account means of communication, geographical features, density of population, and the boundaries of administrative areas. J'aurai l'occasion tout à l'heure d'entrer un peu plus en profondeur sur cet aspect des choses. Cette commission, dont les membres, il faut le rappeler, Monsieur le Président, sont nommés par la section 38 de la Constitution et la Security of Tenure, qui est aussi protégée par la section 92 de notre Constitution. Il est important de le rappeler, Monsieur le Président, que ces dispositions constitutionnelles, notamment l'Electoral Boundaries Commission et l'Electoral Supervisory Commission, ont été à la base du socle démocratique de notre pays. L'indépendance de ces deux institutions est source de fierté du pays, tant au niveau national qu'international. L'intégrité de ses membres ne souffre d'aucune contestation. Exception faite de la campagne malsaine, dont l'Electoral Supervisory Commission et son commissaire ont dû faire face depuis la cinglante défaite de l'opposition en novembre 2019, ce même commissaire a été récompensé par le prestigieux Centre international d'études parlementaires lors du 19e Symposium international des affaires électorales à Lisbonne, Portugal. Cette reconnaissance prestigieuse souligne les contributions de M. Irfan Rahman dans le domaine des élections et de la démocratie. Cela fait plaisir aujourd'hui d'entendre l'honorable Béranger remercier le commissaire électoral pour sa contribution dans la publication de ce rapport de l'Electoral Boundaries Commission, après avoir lui-même réclamé la démission de ce même commissaire électoral. Monsieur le Président, je déplore aussi les attaques systématiques de certains membres de l'opposition vis-à-vis de ces commissions, de ces institutions indépendantes, protégées par la Constitution. Il y a par exemple l'Express du 1er novembre 2018, où, dans un congrès du PMSD, l'honorable Duval s'en prend au fatras de l'Electoral Boundaries Commission. Monsieur le Président, dans ce même congrès, il va un peu plus loin, Monsieur le Président, et les membres méritent jusqu'à la prison pour avoir violé la Constitution. Selon lui, la composition de l'Electoral Boundaries Commission doit changer, car ceux qui y cherchent ont failli à leur tâche. Et il va plus loin pour régler ses comptes à ses adversaires de politique de l'époque. Les deux plus grands hypocrites sur cette question de redécoupage électoral sont Ramastanen et Paul Béranger. Monsieur le Président, c'est l'honorable Xavier Duval, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, dans une île Maurice démocratique, il n'y a pas de place à la démagogie. Il n'y a plus de place à ce manque d'éthique de certains dirigeants de l'opposition. Gageons que ce fut une période sombre de l'histoire démocratique de ce pays. Car, il faut bien le rappeler, il n'y a rien de plus dangereux pour la démocratie d'un pays lorsque l'on sape la confiance de la population dans les institutions. Monsieur le Président, la présente motion est précise. Nous avons affaire à une proposition de découpage électoral en vertu de la section 39.2 de la Constitution. The Electoral Boundaries Commission shall review the boundaries of the constituencies at such times as will enable them to present a report to the Assembly 10 years, as near as may be, after 12 August 1966, and thereafter 10 years after presentation of their last report. 4 rapports ont été soumis depuis l'indépendance du pays, notamment en 1976, 1986, 1999 et 2009. À titre de rappel, les recommandations de 1986 et de 1999 furent approuvées par le Parlement, alors que celles de 1976 furent rejetées. Le dernier rapport fut soumis au Speaker de l'Assemblée le 30 octobre 2009. Et le dernier rapport, avant celui-là, Monsieur le Président, fut soumis au Speaker de l'Assemblée le 30 octobre 2009 et déposé au Parlement le 10 novembre 2009. Mais il est bon de retenir, et que l'histoire puisse retenir cela, Monsieur le Président, qu'aucune motion ne fut introduite pour son acceptation ou son rejet par le Premier ministre d'alors, le Dr Navin Ramgoolam. J'aurai l'occasion d'y revenir, Monsieur le Président. Ce rapport est soit accepté in toto ou rejeté in toto. Aucun amendement n'est permis à une quelconque circonscription. Aucun garant de la Constitution, autre garant de la Constitution, Monsieur le Président, ce n'est pas une majorité de vote dans le Parlement qui détermine un quelconque amendement à des circonscriptions. La primauté de l'Electoral Boundaries Commission est soulignée à la section 39.4 de la Constitution. Donc, c'est une commission indépendante qui détermine les amendements à être apportés à des circonscriptions. Une fois approuvé in toto, les recommandations du rapport prennent effet à partir de la prochaine dissolution du Parlement, c'est-à-dire pour les prochaines élections générales. Monsieur le Président, que ce soit du côté de l'opposition ou du côté du gouvernement, je suis sûr que chaque membre a des opinions, a ses propres observations et analyses quant à un quelconque découpage. Mais il convient de le rappeler, dans une démocratie, il ne nous appartient pas en tant que parlementaires de procéder à des amendements, mais c'est l'apanage d'une institution indépendante, notamment l'Electoral Boundaries Commission. In fine, le Parlement approuve ou rejette l'ensemble du rapport. Monsieur le Président, je souhaite ici m'appesantir sur les critères qui ont guidé l'Electoral Boundaries Commission dans son travail. La base de travail, les considérations de l'Electoral Boundaries Commission en procédant au découpage électoral. Comme cela a été dit, on divise la population selon le census de 2011 par 20 et on s'assure que les circonscriptions visées sont plus ou moins pratiquement égales au population quota. On prend alors aussi en considération les means of communications, geographical features, density of population et les boundaries of administrative areas. Il convient de souligner que les rédacteurs de la Constitution ont expressément voulu que ces éléments susmentionnés soient pris en considération et le population quota soit aussi près que possible du chiffre calculé qui est dans le cas présent de 59 832 électeurs. Que cela soit clair, le population quota n'est pas le seul critère qui détermine la décision de la Commission. Avec ces critères objectifs, appliqués par une commission indépendante établie par la Constitution, il n'y a pas de place pour les intérêts partisans d'un parti politique ou d'un leader politique. Voilà où se situe notre désaccord avec certains membres de l'opposition, notamment l'honorable leader de l'opposition, qui je suis quand même assez malheureux de voir qu'il ne figure pas sur la liste des orateurs aujourd'hui, Monsieur le Président. Donc, la Commission n'a pas à satisfaire les intérêts d'un parti, Monsieur le Président. Il est là pour protéger le socle démocratique du pays. Ainsi, Monsieur le Président, avant le découpage électoral de 1986, une partie de la région de Sodnak, dans ma circonscription numéro 18, était dans la circonscription de la caverne Félix, alors que l'ensemble de la région de Sodnak s'identifie avec la ville de Quatre-Bornes. Il en est de même pour la région de la Sauce à Quatre-Bornes, que l'honorable Paul-Raymond Béranger connaît très bien, qui votait dans la circonscription numéro 19, Istanay-Rosil, avant l'élection générale de 1987, alors que cette région fait partie intégrante de la ville de Quatre-Bornes. Donc c'était tout à fait normal que la région de la Sauce soit annexée à la circonscription numéro 18 de Belle-Rose-Quatre-Bornes. Donc le découpage électoral de 1986 a corrigé ces anomalies, Monsieur le Président. La question n'est pas de savoir quel est le parti politique, quel est le leader qui a laissé de plumes ou de moustaches, mais le fait demeure que ce fut une décision d'une commission indépendante, établie par la Constitution avec des critères objectifs. Monsieur le Président, le leader de l'opposition, le leader du PMSD, déplore que le fait que, malgré le découpage, la différence du nombre d'électeurs subsiste toujours entre certaines circonscriptions. C'est un fait, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, mais quand même, il ne faut pas non plus avoir la mémoire sélective. Le découpage électoral effectué en 1986, suivant la motion de Sanirou Jagnat, s'est produit après 20 ans, c'est-à-dire après le découpage de 1966. La motion d'aujourd'hui est présentée par le Premier ministre, l'honorable Pravin Kumar Jagnat, alors que le dernier découpage a été approuvé par le gouvernement fut en 1999. Les grosses différences sont inévitables, mais il est au crédit de la Commission qu'avant la présente réforme, il faut bien le souligner, la plus grande circonscription fut le numéro 5, avec 65 115 électeurs, et la plus petite fut le numéro 3 avec 21 943 électeurs, soit dans un ratio de 3:1. Avec la présente réforme, la plus grande circonscription devint 4 bornes, avec 56 267 électeurs, et la plus petite, le numéro 2, avec 29 962 électeurs. Le ratio diminue pour venir à 2:1. Que s'est-il passé en 2009, Monsieur le Président? Que s'est-il passé en 2009? Le rapport, comme je l'ai dit, est soumis au Speaker le 30 octobre 2009, déposé au Parlement le 10 novembre 2009. Anne Machéan ne voit-il rien venir? L'honorable Paul Raymond Béranger, leader de l'opposition, dans une PNQ en novembre 2009, adressée au Premier ministre d'alors, demanda when a motion will be introduced in the Assembly, and in case it is approved, indicate if measures will be taken to ensure that no electors be disenfranchised. B, if a motion will be introduced in the Assembly for the inclusion of the islands of Chagos Archipelagos, Tromelin and Saint-Brandon in such one of the constituencies as may be determined by the Electoral Boundaries Commission and as recommended in the report. Une question importante, à plus d'un titre, mais qui donnait quand même une porte de sortie au Premier ministre d'Anor, le Dr Navin Ramgoolam. Avec la compilation de la liste des électeurs après le 16 août 2009, il y avait un risque de disenfranchisement of electors en cas d'élection avant août 2010. À la différence de 1976, Monsieur le Président, l'Electoral Boundaries Commission avait prévu cela et recommandé expressément the taking of appropriate legislative measures to prevent the risk of disenfranchisement. Mais il n'y a pas eu de provision législative à cela, Monsieur le Président. Donc, Monsieur le Président, dans ce même débat, l'honorable Paul Raymond Béranger, malgré les tractations politiques en cours, ne pouvait cacher son agacement. The last report was presented in March 1999. Therefore, we are already late, and I won't go into the reasons. I am sure the Honorable Prime Minister is aware that in 1976, the then Prime Minister presented a motion 11 days after the report was tabled. In 1986, the then Prime Minister, Sanil Jagannath, presented a motion after 3 days, and the Dr. Navin Ramgoolam in 1999 presented a motion 9th month. Today it is the 11th day, and the Prime Minister can no longer do the same job as his father. C'était en 2009, Monsieur le Président. Autre occasion ratée, c'était d'inclure les Chagos Archipelagos, incluant Diego Garcia dans une des circonscriptions du pays. Permettez-moi aussi de mentionner le PQ de l'honorable Adila Miamia, le 30 novembre 2010. Le 30 novembre 2010, Monsieur le Président, c'était après les élections générales. He will state when a motion in relation thereto will be presented, etc., etc. Et là, il n'y avait plus de prétexte, Monsieur le Président, pour ne pas venir de l'avant avec une motion. Comme c'était après les élections générales, il n'y a pas eu de disenfranchisement et, comme vous le savez bien, les élections générales avaient eu lieu le 5 mai avant. Mais le Dr Navin Ramgoolam, Renard Camillet, trouva une autre parade. It is now proposed that all legal and other implications be considered in the wider exercise of constitutional reforms, including the reform of the electoral system. Il mélange l'Electoral Boundaries Commission Report et le système électoral. Deux aspects complètement différents, Monsieur le Président. Et c'était fait expressément. Le renard qu'il est ouvre la voie savamment, la porte à du cause causé. Monsieur le Président, l'honorable Reza Outim, fraîchement élu député, fait la leçon au Dr Navin Ramgoolam, aujourd'hui son nouveau leader. Pourquoi ne pas appliquer le rapport SAC sur la réforme électorale qui préconise l'amendement de la section 39 de la Constitution to make the recommendation of the Electoral Boundaries Commission binding and not subject to a vote in Parliament. Monsieur le Président, il doit être clair pour tout le monde, y compris pour les membres de l'opposition, que les questions relevant d'un quelconque best-loser system, les questions relevant d'un éventuel recensement communal si cher au leader de l'opposition, leader du PMSD, l'honorable Xavier Duval, toute question relevant de la réforme électorale, de la représentation proportionnelle, du nombre de représentants par circonscription, renaming of constituencies, merging of constituencies, augmentation du nombre des circonscriptions, cela ne relève pas du mandat de l'Electoral Boundaries Commission, Monsieur le Président, mais bien d'une réforme du système électoral à être soumis à des propositions et des amendements par le Parlement. Monsieur le Président, permettez-moi de dire quelques mots sur la circonscription numéro 18, Belle-Rose-Quatre-Bornes. La ville de Quatre-Bornes fut créée par une ordonnance passée en 1895, mais qui est entrée en vigueur en 1896. Selon une carte préparée par des cubes, en 1880, le nom de Quatre-Bornes fut donné et délimita les propriétés de Palma, Bassin, Trianon et Beauséjour. À cette époque, la ville était composée d'environ 7279 habitants et la limite de la ville fut comme suit. Au nord, il y avait le balisage entre Beauséjour et la ville de Beaubassin-Rosil. À l'ouest, le balisage entre Beauséjour et la Louise jusqu'à Palma, Vaqua Roads. Et au sud, le balisage entre la Louise et Trianon jusqu'à Palma Road, jusqu'à sa jonction avec la route principale près du Saint-Jean Church. Et à l'est, Penn Williams River down Northern Limit. Et en 1895, l'ordonnance Acte de 32, Quatre-Bornes accéda au statut de ville. En 1968, quand Maurice devint indépendant, le Town Council devint une municipalité. Et en 1941, le Conseil prit la décision de construire Cité Beauséjour et Cité Père-Laval. Et en 1960, le morcellement Saint-Jean vit le jour. Et en 1967, les régions de Beaubassin et Palma furent annexées pour faire partie de la ville par Proclamation No. 2, Government Notices 1967. Depuis 1967, Monsieur le Président, les régions de Bassin et Palma furent annexées à la ville de Quatre-Bornes. Et la région de Sodnac fut développée dans les années 90. Et, comme je l'ai mentionné, en 1987, la région de la Sauce fut annexée de la circonscription de Belle-Rose-Quatre-Bornes. Les développements majeurs s'en suivirent, avec le développement de plusieurs régions de Quatre-Bornes, Monsieur le Président. Les régions de Trianon, Ébène, la Cybercité, la région de Saint-Jean, Palma, Pierrefonds, le balisage de Bassin, et la NRGC de Palma et la NRGC de Bassin aussi furent construits respectivement en 1998 et en 2020. La ville de Quatre-Bornes a connu une mutation profonde, prenant de la cybercité d'Ébène, Trianon jusqu'à Palma-Bassin. Cette mutation profonde a bel et bien été considérée par l'Electoral Boundaries Commission. Avant de considérer le découpage d'une circonscription en particulier, la même commission a aussi considéré le ripple effect d'un tel amendement sur les adjoining constituencies. Ainsi, Monsieur le Président, avec les amendements proposés, les adjoining constituencies, notamment les circonscriptions 15, la circonscription numéro 15, passe de 52 256 à 57 192 électeurs. Eastern et Rosil passe de 38 433 à 40 102. Savane Black River de 63 500 à 47 541. Et le numéro 8, quartier militaire Moka, de 45 268 à 45 104. Autre considération importante, Palma, Bassin et Résidence Kennedy tombent sous l'administration de la ville de Quatre-Bornes. Monsieur le Président, je connais bien cette région pour avoir été moi-même conseiller et aussi maire de ce ward en particulier. C'est pour vous dire que la spécificité de cette région de Palma-Bassin trouve sa place à part entière dans la circonscription numéro 18 avec l'amendement proposé, Monsieur le Président. Autre amendement qui concerne la circonscription numéro 18, c'est la région qualifiée de Port of Saint-Patrick, Blondeau, Stevenson et autres, qui est distraite de la circonscription numéro 18 pour tomber dans la circonscription numéro 19. Les habitants de cette région partagent déjà les facilités offertes par la ville de Beaubassin-Rosil. Monsieur le Président, il convient de rendre hommage à l'Electoral Boundaries Commission et ses membres, le Bureau des statistiques et tous ceux qui ont contribué à la rédaction de ce présent rapport. En tant que parlementaires, il nous appartient de garantir l'indépendance de l'Electoral Boundaries Commission, de l'Electoral Supervisory Commission et de saluer leur contribution pour la préservation de la démocratie. Sur ce, je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Yes. Thank you, Speaker, sir, for giving me the opportunity to speak on this motion. L'honorable Ramano a saisi l'opportunité pour critiquer ses adversaires politiques à la circonscription numéro 18 et bien sûr son ancien leader, l'honorable Paul Raymond Béranger. Speaker, sir, at the moment I'm beginning my speech on this Friday, 15 December 2023. Most of my honorable colleagues from the Labour Party are on their way to the SSR Botanical Garden, as in a few moments there will be a dépôt de gerbe at 4:30 p.m. on the Samadhi of Sir Siu Sagaramgulam, father of the nation, as today marks 38 years ago exactly since he passed away. We are debating about this motion that seeks for the approval of the report of the Electoral Boundaries Commission on the review of boundaries of the constituencies on a memorable day, therefore, being given that Sir Siu Sagaramgulam has been the leader of the Mauritius Labour Party for decades, a party which has fought high and low for the right of votes for all Mauritians without discrimination. Speaker, sir, the report of the Electoral Boundaries Commission was laid down on the table of the National Assembly on 3rd November 2020, more than 3 years ago. 3 years ago, 3 years, that's a very long time. You will surely concur, as compared to the 9 months that the Honourable Ramano has just mentioned. The last time this came into Parliament in 1999. We on this side of the House have been waiting for this motion for a long time, so that we don't have any uncertainty about how we go about organizing for the next general elections, but we never expected it to be brought to Parliament in an election year. To prevent this from happening, opposition MPs have been asking questions every year without fail from 2020 to 2023 on when, if ever, the motion will be brought to Parliament for debates. The first PQ from Honourable Lobin was on 7th July 2020. Then on 6 April 2021, Honourable Utim, followed by Honourable Ramphal on 5th April 2022. Same question was put again on 12th April 2022 and on 26th April 2022. And then the Honourable Utim again on 27 June 2023. I should mention that no MPs from the government side have ever asked for any question on this matter during this mandate. They remain silent about it, as if they did not want a revision of boundaries. Despite our questions, did the Honourable Prime Minister bring the motion to Parliament? The answer is no, although he had a lot of opportunities to do so over the last 3 years. But now that the alliance of the opposition has been solidly formed, and that even le service des renseignements is ringing the alarm bell for the MSM, the Prime Minister has decided on the eve of the New Year festive seasons to bring the present motion as a desperate move to try and improve the MSM's faltering chances of winning the next general election. Now, you might want to ask me why I do say that the MSM is using this revision to its advantage. I'm not saying that the Electoral Boundaries Commission has produced a report that favors the MSM. I have too much respect for that. I have too much respect for institutions to say something like that. But my question is it that after 3 years, when the MSM people have realized that the report recommends major changes in at least 5 constituencies where opposition MPs were elected at the last general election of 2019, constituency number 1, 2, 3, 5, and 18, that has made them decide to implement the recommendations of the 3 years after of the expired 3 years old report, which they hope will make it safer for the MSM. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I mentioned earlier, major changes are to take place in the constituencies of Port Louis. Let me now zoom in on what is happening in Port Louis, more specifically on constituencies number 1, 2, and 3, just like the Honourable Ramano has done for constituency number 18. at length. At the outset, I accept that constituency number 2 has to accommodate for more voters, in line with the principle as laid down in the Constitution that the number of inhabitants in each constituency should be as clearly equal as is reasonably practicable to the population quota. In the present revision, it is being proposed to add 9,985 new voters, that is nearly 10,000 voters, from constituency number 1, from the regions of Paille, Gibis, Sorèze, Bonnefin, Plaine-Lezan, and La Butte, these areas, to make it a total of 29,962. These nearly 30,000 from the present 24,238 voters, 24,238 voters. To be frank, Mr. Speaker, sir, I have no problem with that. As a matter of fact, even if the figure were to increase to 35,000, I'm okay with it, in the spirit of the provision of the Constitution. And I would definitely welcome my new constituents, if ever this motion goes through, and to serve them as dedicated MP, the 10,000 also inhabitants from the region of Paille, Gibis, Sorèze, Bonnefin, Plaine-Lezan, and La Butte areas. Of course, if this motion goes through. As a matter of fact, those who were in the House on 24 July 2018 would surely recall that at the material time, there were 5 MPs in constituency number 1, and how against all odds, I had even asked questions to the Prime Minister, who was then in charge of the NDU, on the poor road conditions in Gibis Paille that took the life of a young boy, late Mr. Ghulam Ghosh, because his motorbike went into a pothole which was covered with water on a rainy day. And the Honourable Prime Minister to reply that nail foot will be done, and it was done. The Honourable Fabrice David, who was not yet an MP in 2018, but who was already keenly following the affairs of the constituency number 1, just like his late father, Mr. James Bertie David, has done for nearly 3 mandates, will surely recall about this question. What I'm not at ease with is why remove 4,500 and 4,400...
I will stop you there.
Yeah.
This is the outcome, this is the work of the Commission.
Which I'm not... Okay, I'll rephrase it.
Withdraw that part.
At the same time, it is being proposed to remove 4,457 voters from the regions of Vallée-Pitot and Plaine Verte regions, from Citadel along Inkerman, Boulevard Victoria, Magon-Descentes, there's Magon-Monté, Magon-Descentes, and Defoe Street, from the second smallest constituency of Mauritius, with already a small number of voters, and to send them to constituency number 3. And to replace them with more than double of voters from constituency number 1, which I said earlier, I would gladly welcome those people from the region of Paille, Gibis, Sorèze, Bonnefin, Plaine-Lezan, and La Butte as new constituents if ever the motion goes through. After this movement, the Honourable David rang me yesterday to tell me that there will remain 2,000 of voters out of 9,500 of voters currently from one particular segment of the population in his constituency number 1.
No, even that I would not tolerate. This is the outcome of a commission working under the Constitution, and the outcome has been published, and the motion has been brought by the Prime Minister. You may agree in toto, or you may disagree.
Okay. Yeah,
but
okay.
we are not here to
fair
question
enough.
any bit, any part of this report. Please.
Yes. In fact, Mr. Speaker, sir, that particular issue of aspects, Dr. Ramasitanen, whom the Honourable Ramano mentioned earlier, submit a comprehensive, well-researched paper to the Commission, and it is titled self-explanatorily, and I quote, Proposals to the Electoral Boundaries Commission on the delimitation of electoral boundaries, an informed balance between voter equity and effective representation in plural Mauritius. And he explained at length what plural Mauritius means. Which paper he has submitted, just like I did, I submitted written submission to the Commission when consultation was opened up again in September 2018, and my submission is acknowledged in the report actually, or bonnet due form. This very peculiar movement of voters from constituency number 2 to constituency number 3, from and then from constituency number 2 to constituency number 1, is one of the issues. In fact, Honorable Speaker, sir, the Prime Minister, during his speech, second reading, the Local Government Amendment Bill, on 23rd May 2023, used a very unique term, I should say it this way, à l'égard du poste travailliste, gerrymandering calculé. He used that in his speech. Now, I believe that this is what is happening here.
No, this is, even then. Listen, honorable member, this is a report prepared by the Boundaries Commission.
I have my right to give my opinion on the report.
So you cannot impute motives. You cannot insinuate. You cannot impute motives. Okay?
But how come the Prime Minister could use that term towards other parties in the Parliament?
No, you don't have to question me. I'm not here to answer questions.
Okay. So, you know, Mr. Speaker, sir, as a matter of fact, Honorable Ramano and the Prime Minister has mentioned about 2009. Well, last Sunday I happened to have met the former Deputy Prime Minister, Dr. Rashid Bibijan. And the issues that happened in 2009 was the report came in an election year. So, in its wisdom, the Labour Party, because 31,000 or so voters would have been involved, in its wisdom, the Labour Party did not go ahead because it was too much too late. 31,000 of voters being moved. Now, but this report, I've done some rough calculation, we are talking about 90,000 voters that are being moved. Even worse in terms of number. And this is not all, because this problem will potentially be compounded with the reforms that could entail holding both municipal elections and general elections together, an idea that the Honorable Prime Minister had mooted in this August Assembly during the speech he made on 25th of May 2023 to justify the postponement of the municipal elections for the nth time. You did propose that there could be the possibility of reforms and elections, 2 elections will be held together. But today, I'm quite surprised that the Honorable Prime Minister, in his introductory remark, did not touch about reforms at all, which is major if we are going to apply this, if we are going to apply this recommendation of this report. No, they are not totally different. They are not totally different. Changes for both municipal and electoral boundaries will put tremendous pressure on our election officials and thus risk giving rise to further irregularities in addition to the several ones already reported in connection with the last election. Now, an example being the thousands of Mauritians who could not vote for several reasons. These types of problems have still persisted throughout the last 3 years since 2020. And it's good to remind ourselves that the Electoral Commissioner's Office has this year itself, in 2023, had to correct some 130,000 names.
No, honorable member, you're going too far. We are debating an motion concerning Electoral Boundaries Commission.
Names which were wrong.
And everything that is published in the report, you can refer to that. And if you want to vote against, this is your preference. But you can't go with Electoral Supervisory Commission. You can't go with all these
Speaker,
things.
sir, I'm raising the issues for the sake of the population.
No, I have already ruled. I'm not going to listen to you. Either you accept or you...
Those names were wrongly spelled or wrongly written. Now, Speaker, sir, the 3-year-old report recommends changes in constituency, like I said earlier, for some 90,000 voters, and that figure is 3 years old. But today, no one knows exactly how many voters will be affected until the Electoral Commissioner's Office will proceed with the registration of electors, like the Prime Minister has just explained, between 19 January 2024 to 18 February 2024, following which a new register will become applicable only in August 2024. It means that it is only in August-September 2024 that thousands of Mauritians will know where they will vote finally. But what about if the general elections were for some reasons held before September 2024? Now, this is a valid question because when it comes to election date, anything can happen. Anytime you can have election. You will remember the last election were held en plein période examen, HC and HSC. And several polling stations has to be changed. In my own constituency, this has created havoc this is a cheap statement. Because many people, because of the change of polling station, many people could not vote and were frustrated because of that. Now, if the elections is held before, who will do the casse-rangé? Who will do the casse-rangé? Will it be the Electoral Commissioner's office that will do this exercise of matching the last list of electors that was compiled in January 2023 with the new electoral boundaries as recommended in the report of 2020? With this madness, there is mayhem. I say, there awaits mayhem. In his submission to the Electoral Boundaries Commission on Constituency Delimitation, the same paper I had mentioned earlier, following a very detailed research in 2019, Dr. Amasitanen, who had therein proposed two pathways to address the issue, and that the Commission has adopted one of them, the easiest one. Dr. Sitanen wrote the following, and I quote, "Fourth, I propose two main factors to redraw electoral boundaries in our country. Like deeply democratic Canada, I recommend a balance between voter parity and effective representation in a plural society as Mauritius. Using this approach, I suggest a pathway to reduce the difference among constituency size, while broadly recognizing the countervailing factors of diversity of representation and inclusive parliamentary presence in a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and multicultural society. This balance should hold until we have a full-fledged electoral reform that reshuffles the card in a comprehensive and fair manner, which only Parliament can accomplish. However, the Commission can lead the way and make strong recommendations to that effect." Now, out of the respect, and I say it again, the Honourable Prime Minister has not talked about reforms again at all today. Out of respect of the people of this country, such major reforms, if ever the Prime Minister is going to tell us later, should only be implemented early in a mandate. And therefore, let us wait for the next Parliament to take a decision. At this late hour, I call on the Honourable Prime Minister in the name of democracy to do the right thing and not call for adoption of the changes in electoral boundaries after this parliamentary debate. It's too much too late. We are already in an election year. Thank you.
Honorable Dukan-Lachman.
Monsieur le Président, permettez-moi, avant même de commencer mon intervention, de répondre à l'honorable membre. Je dois dire qu'il me laisse vraiment perplexe. Parce que pour quelqu'un qui vient de dire que son leader avait amené le rapport 9 mois après la présentation, et il trouvait ça terrible que nous autres, de ce côté de la Chambre, que le Premier ministre et que l'Electoral Boundaries Commission ait amené ça au Parlement en 2020 et que nous arrivons maintenant avec la résolution. Monsieur le Président, nous venons avec la résolution en 2009, malgré les 9 mois, la rapidité avec laquelle le rapport s'est retrouvé au Parlement, il n'y a jamais eu de résolution. Il n'y a jamais eu de débat. On est resté sur notre faim. Et lui-même d'ailleurs, parce qu'il dit qu'il a attendu pendant longtemps qu'on apporte la réforme. Monsieur le Président, deuxièmement, j'ai remarqué dans l'intervention de l'honorable membre la tendance de venir dire que telle partie de ma circonscription a été bougée ou telle partie a été intégrée à une autre circonscription parce qu'il y avait des motifs assez tracassants. Mais je dois dire aussi que s'il avait fait attention et s'il avait vu un peu ce que son propre parti a dit à propos de cette proposition de changer les boundaries, ben, il serait assez étonné de voir que l'honorable Arvin Boulay avait clairement dit que ce rapport a satisfait la plupart des gens et qu'il n'y a pas eu, et qu'on a pu amener des changements fondamentaux sans déranger la dimension démographique du pays et la dimension ethnique qui consolide davantage l'unité de notre pays. Monsieur le Président, je reprends les paroles même des membres du parti dont l'honorable membre forme partie. Voilà. Ce que je voulais dire, c'est que nous, ici, nous sommes en train de débattre sur un rapport qui a été fait par une équipe totalement indépendante, avec un chairperson et des membres très respectés dans leur profession. Et je pense, comme vous l'avez bien souligné, qu'il nous faut bien faire la démarcation entre la politique et la discussion, le débat que nous sommes en train d'avoir sur ce rapport. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, sir, at the very outset, to remind the House of the relevance of the review of the electoral boundaries, a review of the boundaries that shape our representation in the legislative body. The Electoral Boundaries Commission has, as mentioned earlier by other interveners before me, has a statutory mandate under Section 39(2) of the Constitution. And it is high time that we had it because, as mentioned by Honorable Ramano, there were reports that were submitted in 76, 86, 99, and 2009. And if the 1976 report was rejected, the 2009 report was submitted to the National Assembly, but no resolution was subsequently made for either its approval or its rejection. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have to consider that this is a work that has been done by a team which is independent, and the Commission, as mentioned explicitly in the report, has been working according to the guiding principles that have been provided by Section 39 of our Constitution. And I won't go over it again, but the guiding principle, as we mentioned earlier by others, had been to make sure that each constituency has a number of electors that are as closely and as possible and as practicable to the population quota. So the population quota, as we've mentioned, is around 59,000 electors. So it is important that we bear this in mind, that there has been a number of changes in demographic trends, changes in migration of people from one area to the other, developments, and as mentioned earlier by the Honorable Prime Minister, there have been certain changes brought about by climatic change. That is, the loss of rivers and rivulets, and we have also seen, for example, that railway tracks are no longer existing. So there was a need to review all that, and we have noted also that there have been a number of developments that have changed the whole geographical, let's say, landscape. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have to bear in mind that it was high time to do away with the disparity that has been noticed as far back as in 1962. And Honorable Béranger mentioned that we are in the right direction, but we haven't reached what he thought should have been done. But obviously, les changements seront graduels et on ne pourra pas venir avec des disruptions that will obviously create lots of apprehension, as we are seeing right now. The report has been done so well, so systematically, and yet we find that there are people showing their concerns and apprehension. Mr. Speaker, sir, over the years, the residential development that have been brought have shown that certain areas have got we have certain residential areas that are shared by up to 3 constituencies, and there was a need to redress this situation. Mr. Speaker, sir, some of the members have mentioned it earlier. Residential developments have been found to straddle more than one constituency. Inhabitants within the same locality were to vote in different constituencies. Honorable Ramano clearly stated how unfair it was because people from Bassin, Cité Kennedy, Palma although they were contributing to the municipal council and at the same time benefiting from the advantages provided by the council, were found in a different constituency. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, it has become imperative to review the electoral boundaries, as the status quo was no longer acceptable if we are guided by the spirit of equity and fairness. Mr. Speaker, sir, this report has been worked out in a very scientific manner. It has taken on board current and future developments, inland migration trends, and, as stated earlier, has considered written representations up to 52 and conducted 21 public hearings wherein 35 persons have deposed. Not only that, the members of the Commission had gone to carry out site visits, they have met and interacted with inhabitants, and the concerns and aspirations of the inhabitants were taken on board, were considered. Mr. Speaker, sir, as mentioned by others, the report, in fact, has brought alterations to only few constituencies. And some of them have had very negligible changes. Mr. Speaker, sir, I will focus on the main ideas that have guided the members of the Commission. Firstly, as I mentioned earlier, the work was based on a meticulous analysis, on informed judgment, and a commitment to serve for the greater good. The recommendation represents a sincere effort to foster a more inclusive and representative electoral landscape. The objective also was to bring the ratio of the largest constituency to the smallest one from 3:1 to 2:1. Residential areas which were previously shared by two constituencies will now be in a single one. For example, areas like Le Hocher and Terre Rouge will now be together in the same constituency, and people living close to one another and having strong links and sharing common facilities will now be able to cast their votes in the same constituency. So regions falling within the same municipal boundaries also would be clustered together. This is, as mentioned earlier, the case for Résidence Kennedy, Palma, and Bassin, which are now being integrated in constituency number 18. Mr. Speaker, I won't go on the figures. Everything is given very explicitly and clearly in the report. But I will just draw the attention of the House on the fact that a motion was passed in the National Assembly on the 12th July 2019 for the inclusion of the Chagos Archipelago in one of the constituencies of Mauritius. And the Commission has proposed to integrate the Chagos Archipelago in constituency number 1. This indeed is a landmark recommendation, and the decision was taken on based on the fact that most of the Chagosian community live mainly in the region of Pointe-aux-Sables, and the office of the Chagos Refugees Group is also found in that same constituency. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to commend the team of the Electoral Boundaries Commission for the tremendous work and effort they have had to put in and to produce this report, as a rebalancing of the ratio of the smallest constituency to that of the largest one is by no mean feat. And being given that addressing the challenges of representation had to be coupled with minimizing disruptions as far as possible. Mr. Speaker, sir, I hope that the honourable members of both sides of the House, in spite of their personal advantage or perceived disadvantage, I hope that they will approve the Electoral Boundaries Commission's report, and because, mainly, it is imperative for us to prioritize the greater interests of our democratic principles over any individual or partisan consideration. Mr. Speaker, sir, we must remember that this particular report comes from a totally independent body, from the Electoral Commission, Boundaries Commission, and, Mr. Speaker, sir, ce rapport a été travaillé par des gens respectés, comme je l'ai dit plus tôt. Et il n'y a aucun doute, Monsieur le Président, que les recommandations ont été faites d'une manière scientifique and unbiased. Mr. Speaker, sir, this resolution is a timely one. Elections are not to be held before the end of 2024, and that too, it is a prerogative of the Prime Minister to decide about the timing. This report has been tabled in 2020. Everyone knows what is present in what is given in the report. We have time, and as the Prime Minister mentioned, there are actions that will be taken by the authorities concerned. So I really fail to understand the qualms and apprehensions of honourable members of the opposition, as the report is explicit and has clearly explained the rationale behind each and every recommendation, and the guiding principles were clearly enunciated. Mr. Speaker, sir, I for one, and we on this side of the House, fully and unreservedly subscribe to the Electoral Boundaries Commission's 2020 report. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am very honored to have a word on this motion of the Prime Minister. As regards to the approval of the report of the Electoral Boundaries Commission on the review of the boundaries, which was released in 2020, the question has been why it has taken 3 years. We hope that it was because of, how I would say, it was not for political reasons. The other thing is, I would like to say, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that over 50 years since the first boundaries were designed, a lot has changed dramatically in a number of constituencies. For example, if we take the constituency of number 5 in 1967 and how it is today, there has been fundamental changes. Other constituencies where there have been fundamental changes also are constituency number 14, constituency number 18, constituency number 14, as I mentioned, number 5, there have been fundamental changes. 18 have had fundamental changes. Number 2 have had fundamental changes, and number 3 as well. Well, the ideal would be to have 59,832 voters in each constituency. But we know the disparity which we inherited in the first boundary conception, and there have been many efforts over the years. Je pense, moi, que nous sommes dans une évolution positive pour aller dans une direction où dans chaque circonscription, on aurait un nombre égal d'électeurs. Mais l'île Maurice est extrêmement complexe, Monsieur le Président. La première configuration prévoyait grosso modo 10 circonscriptions urbaines et 10 circonscriptions rurales. Et il y avait quelques circonscriptions où la ruralité et l'urbain étaient à cheval. Par exemple, la circonscription numéro 4, la circonscription numéro 18, la circonscription numéro 17, où il y avait un arrière-pays rural et il y avait aussi la ville. Au fil du temps, nous avons vu les évolutions. Il y a eu aussi le fait que le rapport de 2009 n'a pas été présenté à l'Assemblée à l'époque, ce qui fait que ce n'est que 20 ans plus tard que nous sommes en train de nous retrouver avec une nouvelle configuration. Une proposition que je fais, est-ce que nous ne devons pas avoir un délai après la déposition de ce rapport, que le rapport soit été présenté au Speaker, est-ce qu'on ne devrait pas avoir un délai pour que le Premier ministre ou le Leader of the House puisse présenter ce rapport à la Chambre pour qu'il y ait un débat? Aujourd'hui, c'est entièrement la discrétion du Premier ministre de le faire, et la discrétion de le faire ou aussi la discrétion quand le faire. Je salue l'effort du Premier ministre pour que le Chagos soit inclus dans une circonscription. Je pense que c'est hautement symbolique, c'est une très bonne chose, ça envoie un très grand signal concernant notre souveraineté. Et il y a quelque chose d'autre que je voudrais soulever, la question de il y a de plus en plus la diaspora mauricienne qui souhaite participer aux élections à Maurice. Et c'est clair que la diaspora ne peut pas participer aux élections à Maurice dans les circonscriptions telles que c'est, mais on pourrait éventuellement penser à des circonscriptions internationales, hémisphère nord, hémisphère sud, pour un représentant ou deux représentants qui ne changeraient pas forcément la composition de la Chambre. Ces deux propositions, je les fais par rapport donc en ce qui concerne le temps pour que le Premier ministre puisse déposer le rapport à la Chambre et amener un vote. Nous devons être clairs sur un point. Dans beaucoup de circonscriptions, et notamment dans les élections de 2019, les résultats ont été extrêmement serrés. Donc le découpage des circonscriptions peut avoir une incidence extrêmement cruciale pour une majorité, pour qu'une majorité puisse se dégager lors des élections. Il y a eu par exemple des résultats où il y a eu des différences de 25 votes, de 50 votes, de 100 votes, et le découpage donc des circonscriptions peut avoir une grande incidence et peut être même crucial pour qu'il y ait une majorité qui puisse se dégager. C'est pour ça que nous devons nous poser la question. Est-ce que le travail qui a été fait par une institution indépendante que nous respectons?
No,
Moi, je pense...
No, there is no question.
No,
Listen to me. What is happening? You're the speaker there, I'm the speaker here. So this report has been done by a commission under the Constitution of Mauritius. You have no right to question anything about. You can refer to the terms, to the observations, you can refer to that. Don't question this report.
You allow me, Mr. Speaker, I was questioning the report, but at the same time I was giving the answer.
No,
My answer was very clear.
Don't do that kind of speech. Be direct. Don't question the validity of this report. You may refer to observations. Make your own observations. Okay?
Not question at all the validity of the report. On the contrary, I think I commend the Boundaries Commission because it's an extremely complex exercise. We know this because we know how Mauritius is, and we know the constraints. I totally agree on this. And I think that the Commission has done, in the given circumstances, if we consider the fact where we come from and where we have reached, I think that the Commission has done a good job. It has done it in a holistic manner. But what I'm saying is that a lot remains to be done if we want to have this, un découpage idéal des circonscriptions. Monsieur le Président, il y avait eu un découpage des arrondissements des villes dans les années 2010-2012. Et il y avait eu un tollé et énormément de critiques à l'époque. Moi-même, au sein du MSM, on avait présenté à l'époque un rapport, et c'est là pour la première fois que le mot utilisé par le Premier ministre, gerrymandering, avait été utilisé dans la Chambre et dans le rapport. Ce que je voudrais dire, que ce rapport est une avancée dans les circonstances données. Et quand je prends j'ai expliqué justement, nous savons combien c'est complexe, l'île Maurice, parce que, au fait, chaque circonscription est un écosystème électoral particulier, spécifique. Et agencer les 20 circonscriptions, c'est un exercice extrêmement complexe, et c'est pour ça que je dis que la Commission a fait un bon travail. La question maintenant, c'est, à partir de maintenant, puisqu'il y a un changement fondamental au niveau des écoles de vote dans beaucoup de circonscriptions, nous savons comment nous sommes attachés à aller voter dans un endroit, comment nous sommes attachés à savoir concernant comment on va y aller, est-ce qu'on va aller à pied, quels sont les moyens de locomotion. Moi, je crois que avec le vote, parce que la majorité a une majorité, donc c'est clair que le rapport sera voté, il y a un exercice extrêmement soutenu qu'on devrait mettre en place pour que chaque personne, surtout dans les circonscriptions où il y a des changements fondamentaux, chaque personne puisse savoir à l'avance où il va voter et comment il va voter pour qu'on n'ait pas les problèmes qu'on a eus. Par exemple, beaucoup de gens se sont retrouvés, ils ne savaient pas où aller voter et ils ne savaient pas s'ils allaient consulter la liste qu'il fallait ou pas. Alors, pour moi, c'est une avancée. La Commission a fait un travail. Je ne vais pas entrer dans les dispositions de la Constitution parce que tout a été dit. Je ne vais pas rentrer aussi non plus dans le mandat de la Commission, c'est connu. Ce que je souhaiterais dire, c'est qu'il y a des changements fondamentaux et que nous allons évoluer dans une certaine direction. Le prochain exercice, c'est en 2030. Là aussi, je me pose une question, est-ce qu'on devrait avoir un exercice de découpage des circonscriptions chaque 10 ans? Est-ce qu'on ne veut pas avoir un exercice, étant donné la mouvance dans laquelle le pays est en train de se lever avec le développement, avec l'urbanisation, avec l'aménagement de territoire, avec les nouveaux, tout ce qu'on est en train de faire au niveau des logements, des développements. Est-ce qu'on ne devrait pas, est-ce qu'on doit attendre encore 10 ans pour avoir un autre découpage électoral? Donc je pose des questions fondamentales, c'est-à-dire quand déposer le rapport, est-ce qu'on ne peut pas dire qu'il y a un délai pour le faire? Le Premier ministre peut avoir une certaine discrétion, mais non pas la discrétion totale. Est-ce que le prochain rapport nous devons attendre l'île Maurice de 2030 pour avoir un nouveau redécoupage? Moi, je crois que non. Je pense qu'avec tout ce qui est en train de se passer dans le pays, on devrait en avoir peut-être dans les 5 ans. Ça aussi, il faudra considérer. Je pense aussi que la diaspora souhaite avoir un député et qu'il peut avoir une circonscription internationale. Il faudra penser à tout ça. Et moi, je me dis donc que nous avons évolué dans une bonne direction, mais il y a beaucoup à faire pour que nous puissions avoir la démocratie dynamique que nous souhaitons. Monsieur le Président, merci.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will start where the Honourable Minister of Education left out, with the Constitution, Section 39. And I will explain why I am saying it in a second. The Constitution tells us the Assembly may, by resolution, approve or reject the recommendations of the Electoral Boundaries Commission, but may not vary them. The Honourable Minister Education felt called upon to stress that aspect of the task that we have today. Either we approve or we disapprove. We cannot pick and choose and say, I agree with that part, I don't agree with that part. And this is why I totally disagree with the line adopted by the Honourable First Member for Constituency number 2. This line is dangerous. Perhaps he didn't realize it, but what he said, his approach is dangerous to our democracy. This exercise is an extremely important part of our democracy. If the Electoral Boundaries Commission, while drafting or drawing up the map of our Constitution, does gerrymandering, then the Assembly will reject the report outright. But each one may agree or not agree with certain parts of the report. We cannot say, I approve the report, but I don't like that bit about what has happened to my constituency, whether it is La Butte that has walked in or walked out of such and such constituency. Why is that an important part of our democracy? Because the Constitution has set out the parameters. and the Electoral Boundaries Commission does its job. Perhaps they are wrong on certain aspects, perhaps they are right in all aspects, but that is their report. It is a matter, it is a report which is prepared with the technical support of the Electoral Commissioner, and that is the crux of our Constitution. The Constitution has this provision in order precisely to stop what Honorable Mohammed, and I say it, I'm sure he didn't intend to do it, has tried to do. That is to manipulate boundaries. We are not here in this House to manipulate boundaries. We are here to approve or not approve the report of the Boundaries Commission. I felt I had to say this. The next step is what has happened to my constituency. There is Le Bout du Monde, Eben. It used to be a sugarcane field. Today it is full of residential buildings. It is in constituency number 8. And it forms part of the district council of Mocha. Now that is a geographical nonsense. Today everybody knows that this is part of Rosehill. The same goes for that part which Honorable Ramano referred to, Blondeau Street, near Boundary Road. All postmen leave letters there. It is addressed to people living there in Rosehill. Ask somebody who lives in La Rue Blondeau or La Rue Stevenson where he or she lives, he will not tell you he lives in Quatre-Bornes. He is a Rosilien, and it is good. I think it is a good move to have extracted this from number 18 to put number 19. This being said, Mr. Speaker, I will vote in favor of the report to approve all its contents. Thank you.
Sir, I move for the adjournment of the debate.
Seconded. The question is that the debate on the motion be now adjourned. Those in favor say aye, those against say no. Aye. The ayes have it. Debate. Honorable Ramdani. Dr. Ramdani, start your speech.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me the opportunity to participate in this very important bill. Mr. Speaker, sir, today I stand at this momentous moment in this August Assembly to debate and provide my insight on the Financial Crime Commission bill brought by the Honorable Prime Minister. Indeed, the bill comes at an opportune moment which heralds a new era which will pave the way for a comprehensive and robust framework in stamping out a wide range of financial crime which pervades across all sectors of our economic and society. As we embrace the digital revolution, disruptive technologies such as blockchain, cryptocurrency, artificial intelligence, and many others will draw the contours of completely different landscape. As a result, it is inevitable that inherent and heightened risk of all sorts of financial crime, including drug traffickers, orchestrating and committing intricate online transactions, money laundering and acts of corruption carried out in a non-conventional manner, such as using cryptocurrency and dark web. It is also expected that financial crime never seen before will emerge to cause a lot of harm and challenge our ability to uphold trust, adhere to international conventions, and to ensure that our country remains a credible financial hub. Despite the festive cheers, the call for action, bold and swift, is now, as the risks that the situation spins out of control in future are real. This bill aims at consolidating the fight against financial crimes, including corruption, money laundering, and fraud. It envisages the repeal and replacement of several acts, integrating the function of various existing bodies into a single commission. The commission absorbing the responsibility of the Independent Commission Against Corruption, the Asset Recovery Investigation Division of the Financial Intelligence Unit, and the Integrity Reporting Service Agency, represent a bold step towards a more integrated approach in combating financial crime. The reintroduction of the Operation Review Committee is presented as a positive move towards enhancing accountability and oversight. I would therefore like to commend the Prime Minister for his audacity and courage. Guided by the ideal he has always cherished, he has remained in the forefront in his relentless fight against corruption, drug trafficking, fraud, and other scourges affecting our country. The fight against financial crimes under his able leadership remains a collective resolve against cynicism and in rejecting a culture of greedy consumerism in a world where inequality is growing and trust is fading. Monsieur le Président, néanmoins, on note ce temps-ci une agitation palpable et surtout excessive de la part de l'opposition parlementaire et extra-parlementaire, aussi bien que des avocats qui les soutiennent. Cette agitation cache une intention inavouée de lancer des critiques absolument farfelues et excessives, dans le but de créer un climat de doute et de frayeur parmi la population. Cependant, les citoyens ne sont pas dupes et savent faire la différence entre un gouvernement qui œuvre pour leur bien-être et des démagogues qui cherchent à le manipuler. Mr. Speaker, sir, I can understand their restlessness following the blow they received on the recent announcement of the quantum of the salary compensation for 2024, which was by far exceeds the aspiration of our working population, and the unprecedented rise of the minimum wage threshold. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is sad to note that this opposition has stooped to such a level of unprecedented proportions. As a matter of fact, it is still fresh and vivid in the collective memory of every citizen of the murky business of the leader of the Labour Party, now aspiring Prime Minister. Coffers were found in his possession, overflowing with large amount of banknotes and bundle of freshly packed dollars after the general election of 2014. By any stretch of the imagination, could someone ever imagine that such a situation would ever happen in our country? Yet it happened. How will Honorable Ganga Prasad explain to the Dada-Daddies of the Constituency number 6 what his leader did? He was talking about freedom of speech, and in his press conference he said about Ramanaya. You know, his leader, in a religious ceremony, he said he mixed Mahabharat and Ramayana, the characters. How he will explain? How he will explain that his leader is not able to recognize Ram or Lakshman, and he is talking about Ravan. His leader is the biggest Ravan in this country, Mr. Speaker, sir. Looking back at such an unbelievable situation, during the dark moments of the opposition reign, we cannot forget
the then Economic Crime Office, which was once led by a notorious Labour supporter, serve as a blatant political instrument to harm opponents. We will instead vividly recall how a prominent leader of the MMM party narrowly escaped an arrest by the ECO. Now both the parties are allies and making unfounded accusations about the independence of the Financial Crime Commission. This talk's hypocrisy is truly shameful. Quel désolant spectacle. Mr. Speaker, sir, I now come to a lawyer close to the Labour Party and presently in the limelight with all sorts of baseless arguments against the Financial Crime Commission. Let me remind this gentleman who, as chairperson of Air Mauritius some years ago, led the company into a crippling debt spiral through reckless fuel hedging strategies. The consequences, a staggering 9 billion rupees of public funds squandered and down the drain. This very lawyer, along with the former director of the Economic Crime Office, and who was later a prominent member of the ICAC board, were caught red-handed when a leaked phone tap exposed their conspiracy to frame adversaries. Had the Financial Crime Commission had been operational during these dark times, those two individuals would most likely be facing prosecution and be behind bars. I will therefore advise that you see yourself in a mirror before spewing your bitterness in and outside this august assembly, and casting aspersion on the motivation of the government in bringing forward such a key institution to fight financial crime. As rightly pointed out by the Honorable Prime Minister, where he emphasized the importance of legal compliance and expressed his confidence, stating that he does not fear the law due to his strict adherence to legal parameters. While our people had been toiling day and night to build a better future, those looters were busy in feathering their nests from ill-gotten gains, and where greed had advanced to such a state of limitless rapacity. It is to be noted that financial crime represents significant threat to economies, sustainable development, and also insidious impact on social and political environment of the state, and call for the common responsibility of all institutions and private sector to work together. As such, governments resolve to adopt measures to combat financial crime are getting more and more sophisticated with the support of technology. As a responsible government, we ensure that our financial sector operates within a strong legal regime, and we expect it to ensure compliance with the financial crime regulations. Mr. Speaker, sir, as Minister of the Public Service Administrative and Institutional Reform, I am particularly pleased to note that major institutions reforms are being brought through this bill in the area of financial crime, where key institutions which are operating separately and in silo will now be subsumed under the Financial Crime Commission for more synergy and improved efficiency. Such a strategy sends a strong signal not only to local stakeholders but also to the international community. Trust, certainty, clarity, predictability are indeed key ingredient to attract foreign direct investments, improve ease of doing business, and spur economic growth. Mr. Speaker, sir, my intervention will primarily focus on the benefit of the bill in line with our transformation journey in the public service. Indeed, good governance and institutional arrangements is one of the 10 implementation pillars of the public sector business transformation strategy. It is in this context that my ministry is engaged closely with the Independent Commission Against Corruption to implement the public sector anti-corruption framework. Among several initiatives undertaken under the framework, more than 200 corruption risk assessments has been conducted in a risk-prone area, such as procurement and recruitment across the public sector. However, despite our best endeavors, the public sector still remains a fertile ground from not only corruption but for other financial crimes such as fraud, money laundering, which are undertaken by a handful group of brebis galeuses. Government is committed to hunt them and get rid of them. While corruption was dealt with POCA, the law itself had its own limitation. I'll come to it later. Let me talk of Part 3 of the bill, which deals with fraud offences and which remained a key instrument to ensure that the highest principle of good governance, accountability, is upheld. Fraud, which remained another pernicious force in public service, has always been dealt in a rather ineffective manner given the existing statutory provision and integrate process in inflicting administrative sanctions following detection of same. As a matter of fact, the yearly report of the National Audit Office often points to blatant situation of fraudulent practices. Despite our best endeavors, fraudulent practices unfortunately recur. Indeed, petty frauds in the public service had more often than not been dealt with within the realm of administration with sanctions, if ever taken, follow lengthy and tedious processes which are limited to provisions provided by the Public Service Regulation, which date as far back as 1967. Whenever criminal proceedings are instituted against public officers for fraudulent practices, those are dealt under the outdated criminal code, which date back from our colonial past. Clearly, a strong signal had to be sent in respect to fraud, and the more so that electronic frauds has become widespread, being given that the internet has become a preferred platform for online transactions. Therefore, the Financial Crime Commission Bill is filling a gaping void by introducing a comprehensive section which clearly defines fraud as a serious criminal offense and provides tough penalties accordingly. By having such legal instruments, the public service can now deal with cases of fraud within a well-defined framework with efficiency and in a timely manner. It will also send a strong signal and act as a deterrent to those bent on being involved in fraudulent practices. I now turn to Section 7 of the bill, which deals with protection of and assistance to informers and witnesses. Witnesses and informers has always been an effective tool to uncover serious corrupt and fraudulent practices. In Mauritius, there has been several debates on the model which is needed for effective whistleblowing by honest citizens without any risk for retribution. Even recently, Transparency Mauritius argued for a dedicated legal framework to incentivize and safeguard informers or whistleblowers who report individuals engaging in objectionable practices. Aside from a section under the POCA which caters for whistleblowing, this has been limited to exclusive cases of corruption. However, financial crime can take various diverse forms and at times unsuspected forms, not only regarding corrupt practices, but also on frauds and other reprehensible acts. With the Financial Crime Commission Bill, the status and guarantee that witnesses and informers are entitled to has been taken to another level in line with international best practices. Mr. Speaker, sir, government procurement representing billions of rupees spent annually is the single largest market for goods, services, and works. This significant financial power naturally attracts opportunities for corruption and fraud. Addressing these risks requires a robust and comprehensive response to deter and eliminate illegal and unethical conduct by public officials and potential bidders. Aside from many other types of corrupt practices forming part of the Financial Crime Commission Bill and not specified under POCA, Section 27 and Section 28 makes specific provision for offences related to procurement. I commend this specific provision of the bill that provides for more clarity and effectiveness for such types of offences that constitute a significant fraction of alleged cases of corruption case which are dealt by with ICAC. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would now turn to Section 149 of the Financial Crime Commission Bill, which is not only a novel, but an ingenious and effective manner to effectively wage the war against financial crime. In fact, the penalties imposed under the current legislation, such as the Prevention of Corruption Act, has now been within the legal realm. Imposition of fines and in terms of imprisonment. In case of public officers has been charged and found guilty, penalties are outside the purview of the administrative sanctions. Once a public officer has been convicted, the ministry and the department has to initiate separate procedures to inflict administrative sanctions, which is in most cases carried in line with the Public Service Commission regulations. Such measures has to follow long, tedious procedures which may take months to reach to a conclusion. Even then, the public officer can make an appeal to the Public Body Appeal Tribunal. Therefore, in most cases, public officers are ought to have been retired or laid off once he or she has been found guilty and convicted by a court of law, still receives his or her salary until an administrative decision is taken on the matter. Indeed, several PQs have been asked on regular basis on the subject matter. As from now, besides legal sanctions, the court can now inflict civil and administrative sanctions, this relieving the burden on ministries and department as well as the Public Service Commission to resort to administrative sanction in case of public officers have been found guilty and convicted by the court of law for offences covered under the Financial Crime Commission Bill. Mr. Speaker, lastly, I would like to comment on falsehood being deliberately spread and ad nauseam by the opposition. I believe that there is a red line that has been crossed on trying to ban la population when mention is made to the fact that the Financial Crime Commission will usurp and take over the role of the DPP. I am really disgusted by such a cheap and desperate argument coming from the opposition. Nothing is further than the truth. Firstly, they argue that the Financial Crime Commission will be empowered to institute criminal proceedings and that such powers is solely exercised by the DPP. To that, I will refer to the opposition to the respected Serious Crime Office, SFO, of the UK, that serves as an example of the institutional model which is required for our country in the crusade against financial crime. Indeed, the SFO in the UK has clear mandate to institute criminal proceedings for obvious reasons of efficiency, expediency, and more importantly, given the nature and complexity of such crimes. Moreover, the various sections under the Part 9 of the bill cannot and should not be viewed in isolation. While it is the case, the Financial Crime Commission can institute criminal proceedings. Section 142, subsection 1B and C allow for the DPP to take over, continue or discontinue such criminal proceedings. To add, Section 142, subsection 1D provide for any party aggrieved by the decision of the DPP to challenge same by the Court of Judicial Review at the Supreme Court. Clearly, sufficient checks and balances are required in a democratic society has been well taken care in this bill. Mr. Speaker, sir, we all have a moral duty to pass on a legacy to the next generation of a society which is free from reprehensible, unethical, illegal, immoral, and repugnant practices. Unfortunately, these practices darken our reputation and undermine our resolve. As responsible government under the able leadership of the Prime Minister, history will retain our contribution and enduring spirit in building a strong moral edifice and lay foundation for a just and equitable country free from illicit practices, including financial crime. I thank you for your attention.
Members, I'll suspend the sitting for 30 minutes.